Uh, Welcome to Dr. Sadie Whittaker. Thank you for joining us for this chat. We've over on the Science for ME forums, we've collected a number of questions, and we're going to run through those and just talk to you about the work that Solve are doing. Well, broadly speaking, on many categories, quite a lot on the research side. So first thing that we were looking to talk to you about was your biobank, registry and app efforts that you're making to set those up and put those in place. Really, the question at the moment is, with those three, where are you at? How are they coming along? And when do you see them going fully active?
So first, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be speaking to you today, and I appreciate you taking the time to speak to us about our work. The biobank and registry is, I think, like, if I had to pick one thing that we were doing in research, this would be it. I come from an oncology background and spent most of my career in the biopharma industry in clinical development, and really saw how big data, right, it's a buzzword, but how big data sets transformed what we knew about oncology. So breast cancer used to be a single disease, and we now know tens of different diseases, because of the genetic profiling and the information that we were able to get from big data. I really think that we need that in ME. I think it's absolutely critical. And so I see the biobank and registry as incredibly important. And so we've been building that and designing it in collaboration with patients, physicians, the community, so that we can create a registry and biobank that it's tailored for the end user, right? We're asking people to give a bunch of their own personal information. And so we want to make sure that, one, it's the information that they feel is important, and two, that it's going to be useful for them too, right? Like, it's not just data that's entered into a computer and that's the end of it. So some of the things we've been doing, a big part is we've been creating a symptom tracking app. And that was really based on a passion that I have, that seeing information at a single time point, it's information, right? But it's so limited. It's the difference between a photograph and a moving picture. So, right, the information you get from looking at a photograph versus watching a movie. And so I felt passionately that we wanted to do longitudinal data capture. So we went out to the community and said, what would be like the top 5 symptoms you would want to capture? How would you want to capture them? How would you want to see data from those 5 symptoms? How often would you want to capture them? And really worked with members of the community through that survey, as well as from phone interviews, to understand how to develop and design the app. So we're really pleased with where that's got to right now. And that's really sort of been the hold up from us rolling out the registry, is that we really wanted this app component to be central to the whole design. So that's fairly far along. We're working with the developers, and we're hoping to take it into beta testing probably over the next 6 weeks. So we're getting really close. Okay. And we'd be happy to share a sneak peek with your community to see some early screenshots of the app in terms of what it looks like. So we'll share those with you, and you can push them out. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at with the app. And then the other thing that I'm really excited about with the registry is we've been forging a partnership with the Cure ME group in the UK. Right, they already have a great repository, and so could we work with them so that we could merge those data sets, and that maybe they could use the app too, and so that we start to build a global repository, not these disparate pieces of information. So we're fairly far along down the path with them. They've been great partners, and we're hopefully going to be able to launch that as kind of part of it. And then once we've got them on board, my goal is to then reach out to other groups in Australia or around the world. Just come with your data, and so that we can start to see trends and subtypes and start to better understand the disease.
That's fantastic. I mean, one of the questions that our members had would would the registry and or the app be usable by those who aren't in the States?
Yep.
So obviously, from what you've just said, the intention is very much that the international community is able to get involved.
Yeah, and we want to make it as easy as possible. We're casting a fairly wide net in terms of allowing people to enter their data. We are going to capture whether they've been clinician confirmed, some diagnostic criteria kind of on the back end so that we can parse out the information. But given how difficult it is for many people to get a diagnosis from a clinician, we felt that it was important to be wide, right? And that a lot of the, as long as we could parse it out on the back end, we wanted to encourage people to enter their data if they felt like they were suffering with this disease. So both in terms of that, but then yet to your point, also globally. So we'll have the partnership with the UK group, but then the registry that we're kind of setting up and launching will be available to everyone around the world.
Brilliant. And with regard to the registry, will that be of use, say, to will it be a source of potential recruits for trials, and is that a potential use for it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. So, I mean, how would sort of the empirical case use of it is that we'll have this incredibly rich, both in terms of data points and in terms of number of people, incredibly rich data source that is tied to biospecimen collection. And so as a researcher, we're going to create this interface where you can go in and search for, I want patients, of a certain age who've had the disease for a certain amount of time, and it'll spit out that information and that data from those patients. So you as a researcher will be able to access that. And then you can request the specimens. And so it doesn't matter if those specimens are in the UK, if they're in the US, if they're in Australia, wherever they are, they'll be tied to the information in the database, and so they can get shipped from wherever they are. So that's kind of the sort of the empirical use of it. Your point about will it be a way to connect patients to other research that's ongoing? Absolutely. So patients probably, when they consent initially, will consent to be contacted if a research opportunity presents itself, and researchers will have that option to say to us, we're looking for patients in this age group with this kind of a disease, etc., and we can connect the two.
Brilliant. Main reason for asking that is that, to be honest, shortly before this interview, it occurred to me that with our efforts with the NICE guideline reviews here in the UK, really one of the goals would be to remove graded exercise therapy and the PACE style CBT from being viewed as treatments for ME, which obviously could have quite an impact on what services are actually offered for patients within the NHS. And at the moment, any researchers here in the UK would go to the chronic fatigue syndrome clinics principally to try and find patients for them. Now, if NICE remove from the guidelines graded exercise therapy and CBT, then there is a question about, do the clinics still continue to exist or not? So, I saw the registry as a potential answer should that ever happen. It's much more a way for particularly UK based in that example, UK based researchers to find potential recruits for their studies. Yeah,
no, absolutely. It's certainly going to be possible through the registry. So I think, I'll tell you about this. I'm quite excited about this idea too. So when you, as a researcher, when you search for data, it's going to automatically tell you if another researcher has used those specimens and this data in another study. And it's going to show you what they did, what their results were, and give you the opportunity to connect to them. So in that way, we hope that the research will just continue to build and build and build, right? So everybody's not going to it fresh. There's the potential to look at how certain data sets and biospecimens have been used previously.
Brilliant. Brilliant. We we do have a question about patient involvement and how important you see that, but I think what you've just explained about the registry and how intrinsically involved patients will need to be with that really answers how seriously you view that as important.
Yeah, I mean, I can expand on it a little bit. To me, it's absolutely fundamental. So, patients are partners in everything that we do. And so you heard already how we've integrated them into the design of the registry and the app. We'll also integrate them into, there'll be like a kind of advisory council who sit kind of above the registry, and when people apply to use the data from the registry, they'll apply to this council, and we'll have patients integrated into that so they can sort of see what kind of questions are coming in. So that's one thing. A second thing is anybody who's part of the registry gets to suggest their own research questions. So we're going to democratize the research questions, and people will be able to submit what they believe are interesting questions, and people will be able to upvote them, and based on which ones get upvoted, we'll push them to researchers to get them, see if they can get them interested in research in these specific areas. So that's another one. And then the third one is I want to encourage the patient community to interrogate the data themselves, right? I'm sure among the patient community, there's statisticians and epidemiologists, and anybody who uses the registry can apply to use the data. So we want to encourage unlikely players, not always the traditional researchers, to be able to delve into the data. So those are some areas on the registry specifically. On the Ramsay, I can give you another example. So again, we have a group of people, reviewers, who help us decide which proposals to fund. And for the first time last year, we incorporated, I think there's 6 total reviewers. We incorporated 2 patient reviewers onto that body of people so that they could weigh in and decide whether or not this was a valid use of research dollars.
Fantastic. Certainly, patient involvement, particularly in a field which has, is possibly fair to say, has had patient exclusion.
Yeah.
For so long, obviously makes a huge difference to the patient population when they see their voices being taken seriously, and included in the ongoing process.
Yeah, I mean, to me, they're an equal partner at the table, right? And it's that whole iceberg concept that I'm sure you've seen, right? The amount you spend in clinical care is this teeny tiny bit of the iceberg that you share with a doctor. And then the rest of the iceberg underwater is all of the information that you have as an individual within the disease. And so I think it's ridiculous to think that you would not partner with someone who has all of that information to try and better understand what's going on.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you there. So, moving on. Sorry, I'm just checking my questions. I think I've covered everything in that area. So for yourself, trying to remember how long has it been now since you've been in your role? It's
coming up on a year. So I joined just before the UK conference last year, and I'll be going again in a couple of weeks. Right.
So not quite so new to the field, but still with a recollection of perhaps being, stepping into the role. Can you describe how the ME research field is different to the research fields that you were familiar with previously? Mm-hmm. Are there any easy comparisons to make, or any similarities, to be honest?
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredibly difficult disease, right? It's heterogeneous disease. It's been historical and to some degree current problems in terms of accurate diagnosis or getting people to take it seriously, in terms of characterizing the disease, and then obviously the issue with the amount of research funding which is spent on the disease and how that limits the amount of bench research that can take place. So I think I mentioned before, I come from cancer background where, huge amounts of money and huge amounts of research going on. And I think, you get a bolus of information from academic research, which is then useful enough to get passed along to the biopharma industry, who can then pick it up, and then with their massive resources, both in terms of millions of smart people and dollars, can really help to drive discovery. And I'm a big believer in that industry and how it's changed the lives, or bent the curve of cancer. I mean, breast cancer has gone from being absolutely fatal to being a chronic condition or cured, right, in many, many instances. And so that to me feels like the biggest difference, right? That there is more money in research, which has enabled a bolus of information to be discovered, which is then you've been able to ignite interest from the biopharma industry. So I think on the research side in ME, I was just at the NIH conference, and it just feels like we're getting some momentum, right? Like, I know there's still a long way to go, but it feels like people are really into it, and they want to do more, and they want to stay engaged. And okay, how can we get more money? And it feels a very a positive energy, and that it's moving in the right direction, but we just need to do more.
Well, picking up on you mentioning the NIH there, obviously, now I don't have the direct quote, so I may be misquoting them possibly, but essentially it would seem that we have been told that there isn't sufficient basic research done already for them to know what kind of targets that need to be investigated, and for them to then fund those that research on specific targets. Mm-hmm. And the question that comes to mind is obviously how can we get that basic research done without their funding?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a really good point. About our Ramsay program, right? And I think that is definitely one mechanism where we've been able to take private dollars from donors and funnel them into bringing people into the field to get, generate enough seed data to apply for an NIH grant. I do think there's still a gap potentially in the middle. So some of our Ramsay researchers, like Jared Younger, it's been incredible, right? We got him going with some seed funding, and he's now just got a big NIH grant. So for him, it was a very not easy trajectory, but he was able to bridge that gap. I think for a lot of researchers, the Ramsay program allows them to do, create some initial data. They don't quite have enough to get an NIH grant, right? They don't have anything solid. So one of the things we're trying to do this year with our Ramsay program is bring the researchers together more. So we're creating like a Slack channel where they can communicate in real time. We're going to have a monthly call where they can talk to each other about what they're doing. We've applied for an NIH grant to do a conference, which is all about bringing them together around collaborative research proposals. So our goal with all of this is twofold. One is to make sure they feel engaged and supported. But a second goal is really to see if, okay, you've got a piece of information over here, you've got a piece over here. Collectively, you've probably got enough of a hypothesis to apply for an NIH grant. So individually you don't, but could we do something together? So we're trying to explore that and really see if we can support that, even, providing grant writing support to them. So trying to facilitate that process a bit more so that we can push more and more people to get these bigger dollars.
So, I mean, from my point of view, in terms of, you mentioned drug companies previously. Yeah. Without meaning to be too rude to them, they would seem to be always late to the field.
Mm-hmm. To this field or in general?
So, presumably the basic research is going to have to be done. And if we can, presumably, if we can find more private funding that would seem to be one of the avenues that is required to get the research done, to build our knowledge base, to then identify targets, and like you were saying, to then be able to present to the NIH, we've got this target, fund us.
Yeah. I mean, right now, unfortunately, I think that's our best bet, right? I think it's difficult in the sense that even most of our funding comes from people affected with the disease, or people who are related to people who are affected with the disease. I'd like to see us broaden that if we can, right? So that we are getting private funding from people who are not directly affected by the disease, but realise what a terrible impact it's having on people's lives. So that is definitely one avenue. And I think, to be honest, it feels like one of our only avenues right now in terms of getting a bolus of information. Specific to the drug companies, I do think the big data is going to be compelling, honestly. Like, if we can go to them with and say, look, we've got 10,000 people's worth of data and biospecimens in here, what could we do? And just based on my experience in clinical development, drug companies, they're full of like really smart people. One of the things I loved about working in that industry was just every day speaking to smart people about solving difficult problems. And this is a difficult problem. And so I know if you could get not the senior people, not the heads of the company, not the business people, but the clinical development, problem solving people from pharma together in a room and say, we've got this. This is what we think a disease model might be. This is the information we have. This is a big data set we've got. These are the biospecimens. How could we move forward in some kind of exploration? I mean, who knows? But I'm optimistic that something positive would come out of that.
Random thought that just occurred to me. I'm aware massive companies, admittedly, such as Google and other places, will often allow their employees, kind of personal projects, if you like.
Yep.
So I've no idea if the same might apply to pharmaceutical companies. They may want their employees to keep working on the main task at hand, but it was just a random thought that possibly there are pharmaceutical companies out there that may allow that kind of thing to happen. But
I think that's a good point. I don't know if there are, but I think getting them interested and all of these things are gated, right? In that industry, it's like you do a little piece of work to get to a certain gate to understand whether you have enough information to take it a little bit further and a little bit further. So the initial ask, I think, is fairly minimal, right? But it's piquing their interest. And even if we get to that place and they say, you know what we actually need is this thing that we don't have yet, at least we know we can work on getting that thing.
Yeah. So you mentioned the Ramsey Awards earlier. Obviously, I think I'm right in saying that the latest opportunity to apply opened Wednesday, was it?
It did. Yeah. I don't know if you saw the announcement, but Alison on my team put together a really cool researcher toolkit I encourage people to take a look at. That just talks about kind of the state of the state in terms of our knowledge base, as well as, shares some of Tony Komaroff's disease models that he presented at NIH, and some potential areas that people could pursue in terms of a research proposal. So it's a nice add-on that we've done for the first time this year. And then just a couple of other things we're doing this cycle is we're being wide in reaching out to people. So we're going to directly reach out to researchers in another therapeutic area who may be doing something similar that could have applicability to this disease. And we're going to share the proposal with them and try and encourage a couple of, different people to come in out from a different field. Another kind of thing we're doing this year is we have a carve out for a collaborative proposal. So you can specifically submit a proposal that will get sort of evaluated separately from all of the other proposals if it's a collaborative proposal. So we had that one call out. Yeah, I think you might have seen NIH were gracious enough to share the announcement with their communities. So we're trying to go wide, and we're trying to make this the biggest year yet for our Ramsay program.
Okay. How many, ideally, how many awards would you be looking to make? Or is that dependent on the scope of them, or?
Yeah, I mean, so last year we did, I want to say 7, which was our biggest year up to that point. We'd previously done, I think, between 4 or 5, around that level. So we did 7 last year. That was really based on the quality of the proposals we got in. We'd love to do at least 10 this year, potentially more if we have great proposals and we have the dollars. We'll do as many as kind of, get rated highly by our reviewers. But at least 10, I would say.
Okay. And you mentioned the collaborative one. Would that, so is that looking to be of one application featuring several groups, presumably, working on the collaborative idea there?
Yeah, I think we're defining it by at least 2 labs working together on a joint proposal. So part of it can be done, they can be done in different locations, but the intent is that they'll collaborate together.
Okay, brilliant. I think I've run out of questions. If there's anything, if there's anything else that you can think that, obviously on well, either on the subjects that we've covered or anything else of Solve's efforts and work that you'd like to highlight, now's the time.
Yeah, I mean, I feel really great about this interview. I feel like we've covered the kind of the 2 main pillars for us right now, which is registry and Ramsay. The other thing I would ask is if people can push out the Ramsay RFA to, if they know people who are doing research, even if it's research in a different area. That's exactly what we're trying to do, right? So we'd love that. And then we can also share a link to pre-register for the registry. We've got about 1,200 patients already pre-registered, so there's a lot of excitement about that. And we're we want everything to move as quickly as possible so we can start to get those patients entering data. But if people are willing to share the registry link for pre-registration, we'd really appreciate that too.
Right, brilliant. Okay, thank you very much for your time, Dr. Whittaker.
No problem.